Without any further ado, Rutu, thank you very much for featuring on Uplift. So before we get into personal branding, I'd like to ask you a little bit about yourself. If you can go through your background and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So, thank you for inviting me on this podcast, Yuvraj. It's my pleasure to be here. So, a little bit about myself. I run a brand consulting firm called Jigsaw, which is based in Mumbai. And we're basically a strategy, insights and strategy consultancy. And we work with a lot of top corporate, firms, Indian corporate firms. Our basic work involves consumer insight mining, research, strategic branding, and planning. That's essentially what Jigsaw does. And apart from that, I have about 25 years of experience in this space. So I did my MBA in 2000. I passed out in 2002. So that's 24 years. And I think post that, I basically had a journey where I started off in advertising. Didn't really like it much, actually, to be very honest. Moved from advertising into academics, started teaching. And, I decided that was the time I wanted to actually focus on my PhD. I did a PhD at that point of time for about 5 years. And then I started consulting in the research space. So I started working on insight and strategy projects in a consulting capacity. And then post that was when I actually ended up launching Jigsaw because I realized that there was a gap in the market with respect to firms that were really focusing on strong insight, consumer insight, and strategy. So that's really where my journey went. But I think all of these years I've had a parallel career, so to say, in a couple of parallel tracks run in my life. So one is, of course, my corporate work, which is what I do with Jigsaw. The second is the teaching, which I have kept on for all the years that I have been working. So I still do teach at business schools in India and internationally too. And I also do write. So at this point of time, I'm actually writing. I have finished one book, I'm writing another one, and I also write very regularly for newspapers and for columns. And I write a weekly column for my newsletter. And yeah, I mean, that's just three things that I do at the same time.
Wonderful. Thank you. I do recall watching another podcast that you featured in, and you said that there was this shift from you were doing independent consulting work, and you were like working from a car and this and that, and then you went into opening a full-fledged office. So any learning lessons or any lessons that you extracted from that you would like to share?
Oh, well, yeah, that was a different time, but a time that really taught me what hustle was all about. So, yes, for a few years, I actually did end up, in my consulting capacity, I was working with multiple organizations, and it involved basically going to meetings one after the other. And I didn't have a physical office at that point of time. I used to work from home, and then I had a little garage in my building, and I used to work out of there. I had small kids, in fact, so I needed to kind of get out of there. So there was a little desk that I had created downstairs where I worked from there, and then the rest of the time I was in meetings. So I used to have to travel from one meeting to the other. So yes, so that was a very different time. I think it was all about, just making sure that I was on the move at all points of time, trying to ensure that, projects that would keep me going, good work, exciting work. And I think it was in on one of those days where I actually ended up feeling very, very unanchored. I felt very lost, actually. And I felt like I didn't have a home, I felt very homeless, if you could call it that. And that was the day, in fact, I remember so distinctly. I was in Andheri somewhere where I really need a roof above my head. I can't be doing this. working from the car, eating my lunch, parking on on the side of the road, sometimes even making presentations while I'm on the steering wheel, like, stopping the car on the side and making presentations. I mean, I've done it all, right? And um I I realized on that day that this is not something that I want to do anymore. I need a roof over my head, I need a team, I need people, I need all of that. And that was when the decision was taken to actually start a company, and yes, that's as they say, right, that I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew for a fact that I wanted to do this, so I went all in.
Wonderful. And how long did it take for you to re-anchor yourself when you went all in on the plan to open an office?
You may not believe me when I say this, but when I decided to actually open up the office, I think I sat one evening with my family and decided and brainstormed on the name. I didn't give it much
Okay.
thought, really. I
Mhm.
said, okay, Jigsaw it is, because it's putting pieces together, and it was as simple as that. I didn't want to overthink it. I didn't want to, and I remember at that point of time, my dad actually, made me write down all the expenses that it would take to build a team of my own, and he made me sign on it, and he made me sign on it simply because he said that, if you're going to be doing this, you're going to need a lot of courage to actually go through with it, and money may not come in, and you're going to have to be okay with that. You're going to have to be okay to spend money. And he made me make a list of it, and he made me sign it, and he said, I'm going to keep this, and I'm going to remind you about it every now and then whenever you feel down. And I said, yes, well, and I signed it very promptly. And in 2 weeks, I think I had found an office. I went all out. I looked around. I found my first office in a corporate building, in fact. It was quite a nice, small, sweet space, about 500 square feet. I ordered furniture from Urban
Yeah.
Ladder, Urban
Right.
Ladder and Pepperfry. Yeah, that was the time when both the brands were quite active. So I bought my furniture from there. I hired my team, within that time. And I think on the first day that we started off, there were three of us in the office. And that was the day that we actually sat down to make the website. So that's what we did. Yes.
Amazing. Lovely. And yeah, I feel like the rest is history because I've seen, I mean, I read through the profile and through the brand as well. And you've been in practice for over, I believe it's more than 10 years, right? Or
Yes, this is
more than
our
10.
10th year, in
This is your
fact.
10th year. Okay,
This is our
wonderful.
10th year. Yes, we're finishing 10
Wonderful.
years this.
Awesome. So now if we could dig deeper a little bit into personal branding, I know that you have a considerable following on LinkedIn, over 12,000 followers. You also have a newsletter and you speak at events and conferences and business schools, and you also teach. So before we dig deeper, given your expertise in branding, how would you define personal branding?
Uh, if you allow me my candid opinion on this, I don't think there is a thing called personal branding, really. I mean, I've never really given it any thought, to be honest, Yuvraj. Uh, because I think it's really personal branding for me is about showing up as you are, right? And promise of who you are, and making sure that you show up as you are every single time, right? That's what branding is, right? Branding is about, being very clear about who you are, what you stand for, and showing up consistently. So to me, it's actually just that, right? And I don't think it needs to take any extra effort. I think it's something that just comes naturally if you're very sure of who you are. So the conviction with which you have kind of steered your life, I think personal branding just becomes very natural. So I haven't, to be very honest, I haven't put in any effort on my personal brand, so to say. I have never really thought about it. So I don't even know what it takes to build a personal brand. Uh, all I do know is that I know what it takes to build a brand. I haven't really applied it onto myself.
Okay, interesting.
I don't know if that's a correct answer. I
No,
mean,
no,
it
I
maybe.
no, totally. No, no, totally. I think I think the way that you put yourself out there with all the content that you create, it does come across as very natural and very, I'm sure it takes a lot of effort, but it comes across as effortless. But a lot of people have a hard time to do that as well. So if we were to reframe it into building an online presence for somebody like yourself or another founder or someone who wants to create and attract opportunities, um, what where would you say that they should start or begin? Like how did you start?
Okay, so I think in my case, okay, so let's break it down now. So
Mhm.
when you say presence, right? I think it's multiple things. It's like it's about who you are and what you do as in terms of your work, right? That's one part of it. The other part of it is how do you, what's the outreach that you have with respect to the communication that you put out into the world. So I think there are a couple of things that you need to look at over here. In my case, I think. I just had parallel careers. So I had a corporate career and then I also had a teaching career. So both these careers actually ended up, tying in well together. I think LinkedIn was my primary platform for the outreach part of it. I don't think I've done anything beyond really LinkedIn. Of course, there's articles that I write and media that I end up, being a part of, which is essentially it, and it's actually very it's a it's a virtuous loop, right? The more you write, the more you get noticed, the more you get noticed, the more you write, right? So it actually just feeds in itself. So LinkedIn was really where my platform was. In fact, I did not have too many followers until for many years, in fact. And I didn't really make too much of it because I didn't even think about it. I didn't even realize that. And I had a friend, in fact, Ramit, who used to keep telling me about having a LinkedIn strategy and having communication on it and content on it. And I always used to be, I was very social. We didn't really do something like that. So, in fact, he offered to help me out and he said, you know what, let's do this carefully. So the first couple of times he actually did help me out and then I took it on. And then, of course, I think after a point, I think there was no stopping me on LinkedIn because then it was about me wanting to really, really talk about what I believed in. Everything from my entrepreneurial story to my journey to, things about branding, things about consumer insight. Everything was something that I really wanted to share. So I'm not so much on other social media, to be honest, Yuvraj. I mean, I do have a presence on Instagram and Facebook, but I don't really post anything much there. It's very limited. But LinkedIn is the place where I post very regularly. So, and then I started writing. So then became great to like, put your articles out there and everyone in my community in my industry really is on LinkedIn. So it just became very easy. So my advice to people who really are trying to build their presence, I think you need to have something to say. That's my big advice here. You need to have something solid to say. You need to have a POV, like a strong POV on something, right? In my case, I think I had multiple POVs, but the strongest ones were that, how can a woman actually become an entrepreneur? That was one POV that I had. Building a startup as a woman who had kids, who had a home, who had responsibilities. How did I break out and actually build a career for myself? And how did that career actually end up becoming, feeding my dream of being financially independent and growing and building a life with purpose. So that was one strong POV which I had, which I keep writing about. In fact, my book is about that too. The second POV that I had was on branding as a subject, right? And which is essentially what it takes to really build a big brand or a good brand, and how solid and how consistent you need to be when it comes to building a brand. So I had a strong POV on that. Of course, there's nothing of brands that I had worked on, brands that I had built, and that became a very strong POV. And the third POV that I always used to write about, and I still do write about, is consumer insight, which is actually giving people a flavor of what India is, right? And
Hmm.
Indian behavior is, which is the culture, the subcultures, the societal dilemmas that people go through, everything that, you and I kind of take for granted, and we look around and we see it all the time, but we've not put a name to it. So I write a lot about that. These are three things that I basically wrote about. These are strong POVs that I do have. So ultimately, what ended up happening is that my articles are on that. My book is on that. My second book is, in fact, is on the culture POV.
Okay.
Um, and my speaking assignments are on it. So every POVs that I've, but to be honest, I haven't really built it with intent. It's just things that I really believe in, which is why it came out so naturally.
Mhm. Yeah, I resonate with that as well. I think if you have two or three topics like yourself, in your case, you have three that you have deep subject matter expertise in, then it almost feels natural and effortless to create content from that space. But if you do it I mean, if you start with, okay, I want to build my online presence, and then you look for the topics, then it'll be a little more difficult.
Yeah.
Uh, nice. And have you, so you've been building your online presence for quite some time. What are the benefits that you've experienced from building your presence online?
Again, it's just LinkedIn. That's my
Yes.
platform.
Yes.
So I think the benefits of it are, I think there are intangible benefits. They're mostly intangible benefits. I think you start getting respected as a thought leader, an opinion leader on a subject matter. I think people do respond. I mean, in fact, initially people used to not really read or respond too much, but over a period of time, I saw that it picked up because I started then, taking in a lot of feedback, and I started fine tuning, and I started putting a lot of time and effort in it. So people do read, people respect. In fact, now I can pretty proudly say that when I meet people in a room, whether it's at an event or a conference or, colleagues, mostly work colleagues, people I don't even know, there are people who come up to me and tell me that they read my articles very regularly, and that happens a lot now. So I feel really good about that. I didn't think that was the case, but now I hear a lot of people come and tell me, come and talk to me. And it does feel like, okay, I am putting in this, and there's consistency at the end of the day, and it does get noticed.
Mm. I also, I think you kind of implied that it took a lot of time and effort for you to gain traction on LinkedIn,
Yes.
and I
Oh,
think
yes.
a lot of people get this wrong because when they begin posting on LinkedIn, they feel like they have to get those likes and those engagements and
Oh,
those
yes. I
followers.
never, yeah, I didn't have that at all. In fact,
Exactly.
I, I, I mean, if you even scroll through my LinkedIn and you look at it like from way back, you'll see that my posts are really clickbait. Most of them are not clickbait, actually. Some of them are, some of them just end up becoming clickbait because something, but a lot of it was not clickbait at all. And never focused on it really. I've never focused on the likes. It happens. Sometimes it doesn't. Even still, I may put up, like, I think last week I had an article in my newsletter which I put up, which did gain some traction, but it wasn't like too many likes. It was just a few. But it was okay. That was fine. It didn't really matter.
True.
I think in with LinkedIn, I don't think it's about the numbers. I really don't think it's about the numbers, though people may say it otherwise. I think with LinkedIn, it's really about the depth of content and who engages with you. And it's also about visibility. It's also making sure that you're always there. So numbers for me, like 12,000 is, I may have 12,000 followers, but that's not so big. I mean, there are people who have like 35,000 and 50,000 followers. So it really doesn't equate to anything.
But I also like the idea that you're creating content that resonates with you. So when you do put that out, you build a following that resonates with you as
Yes.
well. So it's
Yes.
more of a loyal, a strong following that actually engages with you and interacts with you.
And they know
Um,
me for this now. By now
sure.
it's like, okay, they know me for saying what I'm going to say. Like today, in fact, I have an article that I'm going to be putting up on Dhurandhar 2.
Okay.
because I ended up watching it over the weekend and I have a strong point of view on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are times when last week was the LPG crisis, this week is Durandar 2. I've written about anything and everything that may just, touch me, maybe of interest to me, and then I put my voice out there. And there are people who connect with it, and there are people who oppose it too. I must tell you that there are people who really come back with a very polarized response. So that's something
Hmm.
that's a part of it too.
It reminds me of in fact it was my first podcast guest. You're my second podcast guest. My first podcast guest, his name is Giuseppe. He was one of my professors at Esade Business School. He's also a personal branding consultant. So he told me this, that you have to be um, very focused on who your audience is, because if you want everybody to like you, nobody is going to like you.
Correct. Yeah.
So if you create content for everyone, then you don't stand for anything.
True.
Um, nice. Have you so over time, as you built your presence, have you through LinkedIn, have you gotten any leads or any business opportunities that have come through LinkedIn through because of your content creation?
Again, I think we don't work. Of course, there are always inquiries and leads that come in.
Hmm.
Um, And yes, sometimes it kind of, I mean, it has happened not just through LinkedIn, but even through my newspaper articles. In fact, there are some good projects that have come through because of articles that I've written, and people have called me, and, it's turned out into a good, interesting project. So sometimes, yes, it happens, but like I said, it's more visibility than, ROI, direct ROI. I don't think it works like that, because this is ultimately, see, it's some form, it's a form of public relations, right? PR. I mean, when you do PR, you're really doing it to build brand equity. You're not really doing it to get um, a direct ROI out of it. It's very difficult to gauge ROI. But
Hmm.
yeah, it does create an impression. It creates a sense of authority on a subject. It tells people about who you are, what you stand for, what you believe in, what you're good at. And it has a positive rub-off effect eventually. So yes.
Awesome. I want to get into your writing process. You mentioned that you've already written a book and you're in the process of writing another book, and you also have a newsletter from which you post very regularly. So, how do you go about the process from idea to execution? What is your creative process like?
Um, Okay, so in my case, I think ideas really come to me when I'm in the shower.
Okay.
You know, I mean, or to kind of put it in a different way, I think ideas are very random. There's no real process to idea generation. They come about when, maybe I may be driving, or I may be cooking, or I may be, just very heavily stimulated with a great cup of coffee, and the idea just pops into my head. Like a friend of mine had said once that, the world is filled with these beautiful fireflies of ideas. You kind of gave this analogy of saying that, ideas are all around you. It's about you just being able to kind of catch one. That's the way I look at it, right? And I mean, ideas come from everywhere. And then if the idea excites me enough, then I kind of get quickly working on it. So the idea for my book actually came about again very randomly, right? It was one of those things where it just struck me that, hey, there is no book that's written for a woman entrepreneur who probably doesn't have a clue on how to actually build a business and build a brand and what it takes to kind of do that. And books are written for like entrepreneurs in general, but there's nothing written specifically for the woman who's spent many years in the home and has responsibilities in the home but doesn't really know how to get out there in the world. And it came about in a very random way, and I got working on it, and I got excited. I got working on it, and just one thing led to the other. Publisher showed interest, and I was signed up in no time. So sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't work out also. There are plenty of this. The other book that I'm talking about, in fact, did take a lot of time to get through, because I had an idea and I went through the creative process and I spent about a year writing it out. But it wasn't something that excited people. So it could go both ways.
I see. And have you ever experienced a writer's block?
Oh, yes.
And how do you overcome that?
Uh, my profession is also writing, right? Because even my corporate work, we are in the space of research. So we have to, we're writing all the time. In fact, everything that I do is about writing. So that's something that, writer's block is something that I can't afford to have in my corporate. Sometimes work has to be submitted, you have to have deadlines to match, and you just have to get it done. So you find ways to kind of get done with it. Sometimes yes, you get stuck. I think my way of really breaking through that feeling of being stuck is usually giving it a break and going back to it with a fresh mind. Sometimes you don't have that time. Like for example, while writing the book, I faced this several times where I just kept feeling like I was going around in circles and I wasn't being able to really get to what I was actually wanting to do. So I left it for a few days, in fact. So I give it space. So if I have the luxury of time, then yes, giving it space, giving it a little time, rethinking it after some time. But I think one thing that really works for me, as banal that it sounds, is a good, strong cup of filter coffee.
Nice.
It is. It works. It works very well with me. So I just need like a really nice, good, strong cup of filter coffee, and then I think I usually get over my blocks at that point of time.
Awesome. Um, so I also like writing a lot. I mean, this is something that I used to do when I was a kid. I used to write stories and essays and poems. And right now, when I'm uh, with what I'm doing in my career right now, I've also started a newsletter and I'm writing my LinkedIn post. So I sometimes feel like, and this might be just because I'm starting out right now, that I feel like I really have to have a polished piece. I really have to have a perfect piece that I want to put out there. Have you ever experienced this thing with perfectionism? And if you have how have you overcome that?
Oh yes. Oh, yes, of course. I mean, yes, 100%, all the time, right? You never think it's good enough. You're always trying to polish it. You're always trying, and then you redo it many times over because, you're never sure of whether what you're doing is good enough or not. So that happens all the time, Yuvraj. It's not, I don't think it has anything to do with age or experience. It's just how it's, I think the creative process is about that, right? You're constantly trying to kind of better it. There are times when you may not be bettering it, you may be worsening it, but it's a part of the process.
Sure. When you have deadlines, you just push through and then you just give whatever version that you have ready, right? You would
I
say
mean,
that.
see, that's the point, right? That if you're doing work which has a deadline in place, then you don't have a choice. Then you have to make it happen no matter what. And I'm used to that because that's what my work is. But if you have the luxury of time, then yeah, then you keep pushing, pushing, pushing till you're happy. And then you also give yourself, see, another thing that I always do with my work, especially when it's not deadline oriented, when it's just like writing work, is I give myself deadlines, just to put myself and hold myself accountable. So that's something I do all the time also. I mean, I'll give myself a deadlines. Like, for example, my newsletter, I have a deadline that on every Monday I need to have an article on the newsletter. It's a deadline. It's something that I have put on my own head for no reason at whatsoever, but it's a sword on my head that I put and I make sure. So I think about it on the weekend. I make my notes. You'll see me on Saturdays, on Sundays sometimes, in the evenings, putting my notes down because I have put this sword in my head that on Monday I need the article out.
How long does it take you to write the newsletter? So of course you have the idea generation, but like when you
The
actually
idea
write it.
generation takes a, yeah. So usually I think because it's a weekly thing, what happens is that by Thursday or so, I start thinking of the idea and thinking about what I want to write, and then I start putting my notes down. And by Friday, I have some more notes, and then Saturday and Sunday is usually the time when I spend, in actually piecing it all together. And then sometimes on a Monday, if I do get the time, or sometimes it's written on over the weekend itself. So it takes about 4 or 5 days, 3 to 4 days is what I would call it for this particular thing. If it's a newspaper article, then it totally depends on what I'm writing. If it's an online article, shorter. It's a I mean, there is a time when I wrote an article for the Mint, which was actually a real one of my favorite articles, which actually did also very well. It was in the print publication. I was in Germany teaching at that point of time, and I finished my class. I went back to the hotel. I got myself a nice glass of wine, and I wrote it. I wrote that article in 2 hours,
Wow.
literally. And this is like a few years back, but yeah. So sometimes it just flows, right? It just completely flows because the thinking is all here. The idea is already generated, but then there are times when it takes longer also. So it totally depends.
Hmm. Um, what is your take on intuition for writing? Have you ever found like these sparks or something that just comes to you and then it flows? Have you had any experience like that?
Yes, yes, of course. So intuition, I think again, two, three uh, intuition happen, right? I think intuition happens at the idea level first,
Hmm.
where you have an intuitive sense of, okay, fine, you know what, this is really something that's going to work. Um, Intuition also happens when you're writing, when you're in that process of writing and you're, trying to firm something up. I think what works for intuition to really, start becoming more useful is to give space. So for me, what I've noticed is that when I give space and when I kind of withdraw from the actual act of writing and when I'm reflecting on it, that's when intuition tells me whether it's good or bad. You know, there are times when I've sat for hours together, okay, hours together, like literally, like the entire day and maybe late into the night, just trying to write. And I've got stuck, but I have not realized that I'm stuck. I have not, I just keep thinking that no, I need to do more. And I had no idea that I'm stuck. I have no idea about it. And then I kind of withdraw back from it and then I look back into it. And that's when intuition does play its role in telling me that not this, this is where you're going wrong. So that happens. It's that parallel, again, like I said, that parallel conscience that's always sitting in your on the side of your shoulder telling you what to do, right? That's yes.
True. I also feel like I totally agree with the space part. I also feel like there should be a certain level of stillness
Oh,
within
yes.
you for you to like access that state. Because I think when you're calm and in a controlled environment or even in a controlled state, things just flow very beautifully. And when you're like in
Worked up.
yeah, when you're worked up or breathing hard or like things are a bit chaotic outside, it's really hard to create that kind of content because it's not
Yeah.
coming from the right state.
Have you heard
Lovely.
about the shower syndrome, where why do ideas come when you're in the showers? Because when the water hits the nape of your neck, I think it's something to the effect of that it stimulates a certain nerve, which basically lights up new ideas.
I see.
So that's why, like they say, right, that the best ideas come from when you're in the shower.
Interesting. Um, if you had to give three tips for writing effectively, what would they be?
Three tips for writing effectively. Okay. Number one, I think be very, very clear about what you're writing and the topic that you're writing. I think it's extremely important to kind of be very focused on this, very sharp. Your understanding of that topic and that has to be extremely sharp. Um, so before you actually start writing on something, I think it really helps to spend some time in reflecting on the topic, reflecting on your understanding of that topic, and maybe even doing some research around it. The second, aspect of writing, I think, is I think you've got to kind of let let your creativity flow. Sometimes you may not end up writing perfectly. Sometimes, certain sentences close in different ways than you would have imagined. But what I also realized is that sometimes I look back at my writing and I cringe or I sometimes feel very good about it, right? So there's both that happens. So, let your create. I think sometimes, I mean, writing is one of those things, right? That you write and then you let your creativity flow. You can't regiment it too much. You can't really structure it out too much. Like you just have to let it flow. And the third thing, okay, most importantly, is that you just if once you've taken on that journey of writing, you just have to keep doing it. I don't think writing is one of those things which is like once in a while. I think you just need to keep doing it more and more and more. And you'll see that when you do it more and more and more is when you actually perfect it. When you start, your craft really, really sharpens when you do it often enough. So, when I read my articles from like years back to what I read now, there's a huge difference in, how I think, how I'm putting an idea out there. Um, how honest I am about certain things. I prefer to write in a way which is extremely kind of honest and open and candid rather than trying to kind of put too many garbs on. So all that comes with a certain amount of maturity in writing, because you realize that, you've got to be yourself at the end of the day.
True. Absolutely. And I feel like you only realize the improvement once I mean, you don't realize when you're doing it over time. You only realize it once you compare, once you look back.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Wonderful. A little about speaking, which is another powerful way of building your online presence, offline presence and online presence. So how did that begin for you?
So my speaking, I don't think I do. I have a very flourishing speaking career. I have a teaching career, which involves speaking, if you could call it that.
Hmm.
So teaching is something that I do. Every year I do end up going to business schools, and I do take a course. Again, it's purely because I want to be in touch with, going deep into a subject, and being able to actually speak it in a class means that you really need to have a grip on what you're speaking, right? So I started this about 20 odd years back when I started teaching my first class. At that point of time, I remember I used to write down every single word that I would speak. I would take prints of my slides, and I would write down, I would make notes of my slides, on the slide, and then I would have that with me, so that every time I would be teaching, I would have the slide with me and I would have my speaking points with me. And that I used to prepare, like I would have a 2 hour class and I would prepare for like 12 hours. So that was the time when I did that. And I used to really, really prepare. Like that was a lot of preparation. There was no AI. Of course, there was the internet, but there was no AI. So a substantial amount of work, but I genuinely think that that is what deepened my understanding of the subject. It also made me a better writer, it made me a better thinker, because I spent that kind of time really studying the subject at its core. So the best way to actually learn a subject is to teach it, because when you are teaching it is when you're out there performing, and you can't mess it up. You've got to understand it, you've got to be prepared for all kinds of questions. So that's something beautifully in my case. I didn't want to leave that, so I kept it on for a very long time. Even still, when I still do go to teach, of course I don't prepare for 12 hours anymore. Now it comes a lot
Yeah.
more naturally. But being in that classroom, talking about my subject is very, very, it's almost like, you have like 2 hours or 3 hours just suspended in time, going deep into a subject. That's the way I look at teaching, and I really enjoy it also. Um, I think speaking comes from as a parallel of that. So I've had a couple of speaking opportunities which have resulted from, my engagement with B schools and stuff like that. But apart from that, I don't think I have a speaking career, so to say.
Mm, I see. I really resonate with the idea of you becoming a better thinker and you deepening your expertise on subject when you actually teach it to people. Because I had an
Yes.
experience in December where I've built like this a system which I call the personal identity system, which is like the foundation, a bedrock of personal branding, of a personal brand. So it was something that I created for myself. I never had an intention to share it. I shared with my parents, and that was it. But then I decided to bring it out. So I actually presented it to I think it was class 9 and class 10 in a school. And it was a very fulfilling experience because it was one of the first times where I actually brought it out to the open, and I could also identify the gaps I had in my understanding, and the gaps that I had in my logic. So I think that helped me refine the system even more. So I think there's a lot of benefits. Wonderful. And do you think that because you do you think one of the benefits of you building your presence was also led to an increase in speaking opportunities?
Yes, but like I said, I don't have too many speaking opportunities. I have really
Okay.
pursued that space.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
I see.
So, I mean, I probably haven't really pushed myself in that direction. Um, yeah.
Cool. Um, what is your take on the future of branding? Because right now there's a lot of founders and employees of companies that are building their own personal brands or building their presence online. Do you think that is going to have an impact on branding for brands in general, corporate brands? What is your take on that?
No, so your question is that how will personal brands affect corporate brands? Is that what you're
Exactly.
asking?
Yes.
So you mean to say founders having a larger brand than the corporate brand that they represent?
Um, that could be one consequence of that. Also, I don't know, maybe it would change the efforts that get put in on branding, branding a corporate brand in of itself. I don't know. It's I think it's a tricky time because there's a lot of efforts that are being put into founder-led branding. So do you think that is going to have an impact on brands or branding for corporate brands?
Well, it's a slightly layered question and a layered answer that I have to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's as straightforward as that. I think in certain cases, founders have a very, very high impact on the brand that they represent, and there's a positive impact. Like, I mean, we all know Steve Jobs and Apple, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful, like a Richard Branson and a Virgin. So your individual identity or your personal brand is very, very large, and you created it and then you feed it into your personal, I mean, your corporate brand or your the brand that you represent, and it feeds off very well, and it's nicely kind of synergized, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to certain times when it could go very wrong as well, right? It could
Okay.
go like a Bill Gates with the Microsoft, right? What happens then? Or a Tesla, right? So what happens then? So I mean that it's I don't think there's a straightforward answer to it. I think it's about saying that, there are some founders who just have the very natural charisma to attract and create a brand and a persona and a way of thinking, right? I mean, that's really where brands are built from. When it's a founder-led brand, it's built from someone's mind and someone's
Mm-hmm.
tenacity to build something out of scratch. And people find that interesting. People find that attractive, right? That's what all the founder-led brands have actually been able to do. That their story is so powerful and so interesting and so exciting that people actually, pay for that story, pay for that entire narrative that they have. So it could go very, very positively, but it could also go negative in cases where your personal brand may actually end up having an impact on the corporate brand, right? If your personal brand is not like, I mean, and that's happened several times with Richard Branson and Virgin, for example, where, his personal brand, which is audacious and outgoing and outrageous to that sense, has had an impact on Virgin, and has kind of, had a negative pullback as well. So it really depends, actually. But yes, it's to answer your question, is there a risk involved? Yes, of course, there's a risk involved. But is there a benefit involved? Yes, there's a benefit involved too. It's just that you've got to play your cards right.
So you have to have a strategic approach and be
Have
very conscious.
100%. You have to have a strategic response. So if you're building both at the same time, let's say you're building a corporate brand and you're building the personal brand, you've got to find ways to synergize the two. It can't be two things in two different directions.
Hmm.
You can't have an agenda for the corporate brand and another agenda for the personal brand. No, that doesn't work. You've got to make sure that they feed into each other. Elements of the personal brand need to be embodied in the corporate brand too. So, when we build corporate brands or we build product brands, we have something that we call archetypes, right? We use human characteristics or human elements to actually make the brand more powerful. Now that representation has to be from the personal brand, those things. So there has to be marriage, there has to be synergy, there has to be connection. Otherwise, it just goes in two different directions.
Mm, agreed. Do you see the trend in the projects that you're managing for your clients? Are they asking for some sort of online presence that they want you to develop for them as well, or do
Yeah,
they mention
of
it?
course,
Okay. Okay.
of course, of course. But again, I think the founders who are true to their work and the founders who are, see, it's all about the founder having a sense of vision and a sense of focus on what they're trying to build, right? And I think when I say yes, I'm talking about the founders who actually have their focus on the business and not on personal agenda,
Mm, okay.
right? So if that's the case, then you have a beautifully synergized brand. You have the founder speaking a language, you have the brand, corporate brand speaking a similar language, and both of them really complement each other beautifully.
True. Yeah. So I think that answers my question. I feel like the future of branding is going to be more of a synergized approach where the objectives are going to be integrated in a way so that, whatever comes out coherently.
Yeah, I think I
Can
lost
you
you, but I'm back.
could you
Yeah, you're back. You're
Okay.
back.
Okay, perfect. No, I was saying that that answers my question because I think the future of branding is going to be more of a synergy between the founders and the brand, so everything comes out coherently. Um, Wonderful. I think that is all. I really appreciate your time, Rutu. This
Thank you
was
as well.
a lot of insightful advice on building an online presence, on your writing process, and a little bit about the future of branding. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.